Greetings. I'm confused about what tones and what order I'm used to doing because my bowls are both compressed and expanded in ways they're not used to in position and to each other. Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates. Those are people that have a licensed agreement to use my trademark in conjunction with their own interests. And it's meant for the core new core. And it's also meant for anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. Primarily focused on trying to survive as a Pilates instructor because that's what my passion has me want to share more than anything else, is commentary on that within the realm of surviving as a Pilates instructor. So right away, what does that mean? And right away, an easy way to put a frame around it, right? A frame around it is that Michael Miller Pilates as a point of view is just one point of view out of thousands upon thousands. And it's in that point of view that it's been fun to try to communicate to you as clearly and as cleanly as I can so that you can look at the same thing that I'm looking at and say, oh yeah, I get that. And if not, then maybe you'll see it differently, but in the effort, I see mine clearly, and in me listening to you, I get to get definition on how I see mine, as I hope you take what you get from me. So I'm in this wonderful new land of contributing to my patrons on a tiered basis. And I just got a new patron, Stephanie Considine. You're out, girl. And if that embarrasses you, I'm sorry, and I won't bring it up again. But it's nice to have another patron that helps support the expense of my website and maintain my ability to bring this to you live, which is primarily an explanation of two things, which is what being a presenter is all about, is just saying, I know how to make I can make a presentation. Or not even that. I can explain two things. And I do it as a presentation. You don't get to move, you don't move, it's no instruction. There's not teaching in a class like I'm trying to get you to learn, or there's interaction, just a presentation. I'm just giving a ride from down here in the valley up on a gondola to take a look around. Okay? And in that look there is the identification of two things. That's CT and MMP. And don't see it, don't care, doesn't matter, come back down from the gondola ride and off they go. But your role as a presenter is just presenting these two critical things that give you a unique point of view. Right? Maybe only 1.5 now, but still point made in the half. And what do I mean by that? The first thing is core new tension, oppositional rotation between axes. That's, I think, my contribution as a human being that matters most, that is most uniquely mine. And enough so that I was able to and am able to maintain a trademark on this image. Where am I going? Where was I just now? Well, okay, so number one in my titles coming up in Facebook that you don't get to see is called Sensational Foundations. Because I have a new patron, and just putting something out there for free to anybody takes its own sense of foolishness. But when someone becomes a patron and is supporting you economically, then to the extent that they support you economically, you can be unguarded more, you can be less guarded in what you say, because somebody's paying you to hear what you have to say, and if they don't like what you have to say, they can stop paying you. They can stop being a patron, right? This whole thing about patron is to me seems very new age and appropriate, and the more artist you are and the more unique your talents are, the rarer their appreciation might be. But in that rarity doesn't mean they can't be a substantial patron. So, sensational foundations. As you may know, I'm trying to make a backup of things to have them in hand on a hard disk. And it's turning out those things have a lot of size to them. They're very large files. And in trying to make the backup, I actually found out that yes, all of those files I told Google to send to the cloud so I could have more room on my phone, turn out to actually have been moved to the cloud. I was able to make a copy of them on a local hard disk, and several of them stood out and said, these are things to share. And immediately I thought, well, I'll include them in the emails that I'm sending out. But then the thought occurred to me, how much better and more appropriate to at least share them first with your patrons. And so the first picture I picked has to do with sensational foundations, because the first picture I posted to my patrons was an image of a sculpture of Joe, a bust of Joseph Pilates. And one of my patrons responded back saying how important foundations are, and that you recognize where you're coming from in order to have more clarity about where you're going to. And so that took me to, all right, I felt like I made a good choice there, because the image of the man points to me, the creator of, the deliverer of the message, his method. And so where does this story begin, or what's foundational for me, is the existence of the man, the human being, Joseph Pilates, trying to be, as gender doesn't matter, a human being. Choreographed the mat work and wrote the words in his book. And here's where, for whatever else your foundation is in Pilates, from however else you establish your foundation in Pilates, whatever that means to you, and however that matters, what I would point out in understanding the distinction between this point of view, MMP as a point of view of Pilates, and any other, is that it's an ideal point of view, and it doesn't take its authority from anywhere other than the evidence within Joe's book. So to me, that's a very narrow foundation in that all MMP stands on are 3 things out of Joe's book. That's the foundation. To me, that foundation feels like Machu Picchu, and in a very smaller way, but the same similarity, Lost Gulch Overlook, just west of Boulder, on the 40th parallel. My title is Sensational Foundations. And so from the MMP point of view, there's an experience to be had, to be explored, to be developed, to be able to choose to live in that experience of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit as much of as an ongoing thing as possible. And what is that? That means being present, right? Just you're present. You're more present. You're more in the now. Why are you more in the now? Because you struck this tuning fork in your effort to make ideal movement. I forget how that ends for how I began it. Sensational foundations. The fact that you can do that and hit and create in you a vibration that makes you more present and gives you ease and grace in your movement through space. That's the sensational part. That you can put a person in pedal pole in springs, and they don't feel anything. They can't feel it. And if you know that your game is tension, right, and you know enough to swap out arm springs for leg springs to make enough tension happen to where a student can feel a difference. See, there's the whole thing. Feel a difference in what you're asking them to assess. And there is the burden for me, in my opinion, of the Pilates instructor, is to make it sensational for your student in a discernible way where they can apply themselves to have more control. One word, Pilates is exercise. 2 words, Pilates is corrective exercise. And that corrective loop, that correction that comes off of the effort is sensational. That a human being can, your student can, adjust to on their own the more they understand what they're reaching for, not only in their thinking, but also in their being, as well as their observing. You get 3 ingredients as a Pilates instructor. My opinion, a human being has their, and that, I'm not trying to limit that, but the first thing, the definition that Joe writes in his book, right? Contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Right? That's the first and foremost thing in explaining CT and MMP. So if you're familiar with those words, or you have that book, or you can look up that book and see Joe writing those words, then that's one of the key things about understanding this point of view. And if you have the book, in the very next paragraph, Contrology develops the body uniformly, is the second thing out of 5 that to be licensed as a presenter. You can go out and present this on your own all you want. Someday you're going to, it will be very feasible financially. People will recognize the trademark and want the explanation to come from someone who's licensed to do it. But, you know, that's part of the evolution of the curve, and who's to say when that part of the curve comes up, I want to thank all my patrons for just putting money for it to help me sustain the website, all the data, all the exercises, all the lists. Where is that public information anywhere else in the world? End of ad. So, well, maybe it's all an ad, right? But I so agreed with Clayton when he talked about the importance of knowing where you're coming from in order to have a sense of where you're going to. That's a paraphrase. But how important foundations are. And again, I'm trying to come through on this loop again of sensational foundations. And what's, I think, very eloquent and clear, or as I would want you to see it, is that MMP is a very narrow foundation. 3 things in Joe's book. There's a whole spectrum of other places for other levels and kinds of foundation that would include or acknowledge those 3 things, and do. MMP is one point of view out of thousands, based on a theory that there's an ideal within the original work of Joe, which is his definition, his promise, and his sequence. So that's part of the explanation. Now, if you don't want to know it or don't want to hear it, that's okay. I'm here having refined what I'm broadcasting and presenting to what I can see making money as when you go from here to here. Some new way of looking at things. When you go from however you've looked at things before to going somewhere and looking at 2 things that might influence the way you look at things when you come away from that point of view. Maybe not. The point I'm trying to make, helping you survive as a Pilates instructor, is to recognize where is the value, is where the major point of transition is. Whether it's from here to here, or from here to here, if it were a river. You know, the point is to get across the river, or to get from here to here. There's an essential place where once you sort of make it through there, then you make up everything again the way you were, in light of what the transition or the different point of view sheds on it, or not. And I really felt I was on track when I came across someone who loved to teach Pilates but no longer felt up to it. And so in that regard, I've come across with levels now. Instructing is what? What's different between instructing and teaching? When you instruct, you ask a person to do. When you teach, you ask a person to think. And when you present, you ask a person to listen. Amazing enough. But I mean, that's all you're asking them to do. As a presenter, you're not trying to teach them, you're just trying to present it. The big picture, the overview. So that people know what CT and MMP are. Because why? Because to survive as a Pilates instructor, I think there's a huge wave of passion for Pilates encircling the globe in different ways, in different places, at different stages, but all of it drawing in a lot of money behind it. And that money will, in its own interest, make of Pilates whatever monetized Pilates looks like. And will surely someday live in acknowledgement of and mirroring the reality that MMP points to. That's opinion. But MMP takes into consideration biology and physics and makes a reasoned argument to explain what Pilates is. Based on Joe's definition, promise, and sequence. Now, you already know, well, now I'm getting lost in my own mind, so hold on a second. So, what I want to point out is what the foundation is for MMP, and that's the 3 things in Joe's book. Right? And so if you got an argument with any of the 3 things in Joe's book, then, or want to dismiss Joe's book, then you're in a different world of a point of view than the one that MMP is all about. So the foundation of MMP are 3 things in Joe's book. Now, you could say, well, that's just you and your foundation. And I would say, yes, of course. The foundation that I'm built on is Joe's book. Whatever else he wrote and whatever else he did, and I'm not saying he was completely right in his book, because by his own image, he has teaser with an endpoint of tension at metatarsals, which is contradictory to the work he wrote much earlier, and may be meant in a much different way, of locked knees and pointed toes. So, as an instructor, as someone that's teaching a bunch of other instructors who all want to know the right way to do something, I willfully and knowingly pick a target in which to make that kind of a judgment. Okay? And so I aim at what is the target, and the target is control. Right? Return to life through contrology. Well, if control is the root of the word contrology, then control has a whole lot to do with evaluating different points of view or different ways of doing things, or different ways to level something in, or in order to arrange something to have happen. All the vast subtleties of evolving a student's ability to pursue the ideal on their own. And they do that from the first lesson. What matters is how effective you are, what kind of results you see, how much fun you have. So, the whole thing about this presenter focus of mine is as a means of making income that offers people that are hot to spend their money on Pilates a point of view that isn't common and already known about. Okay? And so Joe's definition, Joe's promise, and Joe's sequence. The 4th thing is the identification of core new tension in the body. That's as plainly as I can say that. I feel I'm responsible for and claim originality in identifying core new tension in the body. And that's oppositional rotation between axes. Go find anything that predates what I'm talking about, and we'll look for verification. And I'd be fascinated if somebody said, "Oh no, you're wrong," and different kinds of yoga and whatever, and anyone that points to something that says it's already there here is probably right in that an ideal represents itself as itself throughout its expressions. Just my opinion, the way I look at things. To me, what matters to survive as a Pilates instructor that I have that I can say to you is, the only thing I have to offer you is a particular point of view, and from that point of view you can answer a lot of questions pressed at you by establishing what your target is first, and then offering trade-offs between the conflict of right and wrong as to which one would you do first and why. And in doing it the opposite direction, what benefits are there, say, introducing it this way first and then that? For me, the target is control, because that's the name of Joe's method. And in establishing control, I'm hungry for immediate and perceptible. As soon as possible. So, again, a very narrow view of what Pilates is. But within MMP, there's this presumption that there's an experience that is the target. Meaning that contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. That's the target. The definition is the target. And it's not about someday you'll be good enough of. It's about right now you can hit the target if you're willing, maybe, is the thing, right? Because sometimes I know I'm not very willing to listen. And listening is a key part of it. And yet, you might make a distinction between observing, which I'm much more focused on now than the word listening, because listening is so auditory as a sense of its own, whereas observing is making sense of the sense of what you hear. I think it's important to be a presenter, to be able to offer people solid ground where others can't, or where there's a distinction between what you have and what they have. Know what you know. Know what you know. And even if you don't like anything about me, or anything thereof from me, it's really important for you to understand those two things, the identifications of core new tension in the body, that's strictly biomechanical. That's the way the body engages itself to move through space. But the other monumental thing that's shrunk to maybe only halfway is looking at Pilates as an idea, or as there being an ideal to it. And moreover, that makes it very narrow, that in looking for it, you're looking for an experience that requires what thinking wants to pretend isn't happening within its own realm. And usually the people that understand that are the ones that have enough money to feel honored to pay you what you feel you're worth. Or at least come close. Or at least help you keep your website floating. If I could have a few million more patrons at $1 a month, we could really turn up the light of the ideal within Joe's work. But a campfire is fine with me, and if it goes out, it goes out. The joy for me was coming to be able to point to something and say, I identify this and I give it this name. And why that matters is because it makes alignment sensational, observable, and in the pursuit of core nutension, I don't understand this at all or know why, but the Euler curve has to do with a relationship to distance and space, and nothing to do with, well, it has to do with more than I understand, but certainly not applied to or seen within how the body engages itself, which I think all the body is doing in core nutension is doing what it can do to optimize its efficiency and effectiveness in its effort to move in space. And the reason that works is because of axial rotation dynamics between them. So even if you hate what I'm saying, or you dismiss it altogether, what I'm encouraging you to do is be familiar with CT and MMP, just to defend yourself, right? And it's more than enough to defend yourself from anybody, anywhere, in this realm or way of looking at Pilates. Now, there will be others that will break out of always human nature history in any field, in any subject. Right? There are those that go beyond the conventional, contemporary, traditional, aristocratic way of looking at things and takes the field somewhere new, like Copernicus, Einstein, and Bruce Lee. And yes, see, I don't mean to brag, I'm merely trying to help you see through my eyes what I'm pointing to as the difference between conventional, contemporary, traditional, and aristocratic to another way of looking at things. And in this regard, MMP is an ideal way of looking at things. But I think I see evidence of the natural human evolution idealizing in their own way and making of it what they wish and how they wish. That's human nature. My point is that if there is an ideal within Pilates, the more honest light you shed on it, the more obvious the ideal will be, no matter what direction you come from. Okay. The two things that are most important to me, and the first one being, as a presenter, you present core nutention first, because if they're going to step really out of what their norm is, or their way of looking at things is, their point of view, and they may not think it's any different at all, or they may grumble from the back of the room that this is the same as la-da-da. You know? Maybe it is. What is la-da-da? But recognizing that your only role is not to defend any other or give perspective or relationship to any other way of looking at Pilates, but MMP is about looking at a theory of an ideal within that gets you to an experience of complete coordination of your being, thinking, and observing. And so that's where MMP is something different insofar as it says the spirit, whatever else anybody else thinks of it, in MMP it means observing. And in Joe saying body, mind, and spirit, naming three things, then he didn't say body, mind, and more mind, and he didn't just say body, mind in his definition, though sometimes he talked about body and mind without mentioning spirit. But given his definition and given three words, MMP attributes those three words to be present tense continuing as being, thinking, and observing, and the effort of the instructor to be a coordination of those capacities. And for someone that observes within their thinking, that's not a big deal. It's most of the humanity, right? And none of it's a big deal because it's all fun waiting to be had in the reach for the complete coordination, in the reach for the experience within MMP, but that's just MMP. Right? There's a lot of other points of view that I don't know about. And that's where I encourage you as a presenter to just be there and know that you're what do? You make 3 passes in your presentation on whatever you have to say. You try to be repetitive in a recognizable fashion that becomes capable of anticipation. That's the struggle of life, right? So my notes are, come back to survival, because I always do in a way of framing who I am and what I'm about and who Joe was and what it's about. And what is the foundation of this? The foundation is of a human survivor. This is survival training by a survivor. Survival training. Conditioning. What you condition yourself for as a human being to survive. And see, in that, the choreography is a direct reaction to reality. And understanding the reaction and the structure of that reaction gives you everything to know about how to cue your student as to what you want them to listen to as far as sensation that they can feel and make discernment in. Just like anything else, there's a vast spectrum in being a Pilates instructor. And there's no reason for you, other than charity, to be. And I know it's a great charity to give back what you love. Maybe I'll feel differently if I have a few more patrons. But right now, as a Pilates instructor, you not only function to survive as a Pilates instructor, you not only function to make value for what you do, you exchange value for value, but it's karmic as well, I think, and maybe I'm deluded, but you give a person that has a lot an opportunity to spend a lot. Because a person that has a lot to spend is looking for good places they like to spend it, or they would like to spend it. That's why I keep thinking the upper tier on my Patreon account is too low. It's $1,000 a month as a patron. And that's easily too low for many of the people I know that would just be sending it as a patron instead of to the IRS. See, so know that just like there's a spectrum in what you are as a person and what Pilates instructors teach as part of being an instructor, know enough about CT and MMP to defend yourself from the current wave or from everything else that's out there. See? I'm a Pilates snob, and you are too, and all of us are, especially about something that we love and cherish, and we have such a connection to, and it means so much to us in the way that it means that it's sacred. See? So for whatever else Pilates is to you that's sacred, my point is understanding it in an ideal way lends you the foundation of that ideal. And if it completely contradicts everything that you do as a Pilates instructor, that's not going to matter, because there's a lot of people out there that are already doing what they want. Right? But to the extent of having a handle on at least one ideal view of Pilates, that's the half. Because I feel somebody else cooking up their expression of an ideal, or here's what Pilates is according to this, and we'll see if there's a necessary link of tradition to that, or if the ideal is independent of tradition. See, that's the whole point, is that to whatever extent there is an ideal, doesn't matter what your tradition is, because there's something there in and of itself. That's bad enough, because I'm not smart enough to know what that is. But even if I'm not smart enough to know what that is, the kicker is that in and of itself boils down to a sensation that you can feel, that you can experience. See, I make some kind of distinction. Your sensations come in like independently, but when you coordinate being, thinking, and observing, it's an experience. And that's because, to me, I'd say, yes, you have being in the moment and thinking in the moment, but observing in the moment is something that can only exist in the moment without distraction. Because it is tied to the moment you're in, it's tied to the subject that's being observed. I know that's convoluted, but observing has to be there. Spirit, in the MMP point of view, is not spiritual. That's interpretive. That's more thinking, out from the mind, thinking. Spirit is not spiritual in MMP. Spirit is observing in MMP. In MMP. Okay, so. A fricassee is a stew made out in the West where it was comprised of different chunks of meat and other stuff, probably vegetables, but the primary characteristic, as I understand it, of a fricassee is a stew that has different types of game in it. And Pilates I consider to be a fricassee insofar as different types of game within it, and it came from different sources of protein and offer different results, or just the special interest groups of the different types of game within a fricassee also are, though all of us with magnets that seek to facilitate and engender and enlarge our engagement with whatever the rest of it is. However I'm making my money now, I would like to make more money, probably the way I'm making it, and even other ways if that's easy enough to be worth making it that way. Right? The adding two and two part of being an instructor. Life can't live forever, and doesn't. Add two and two. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Oh, I said add two and two out of I've been talking about money. Add two and two. Observe what's going on and make something of it. Like read between the lines, or see lines and see stuff existing between those lines. Look behind the curtain, or at least know that what you see is a curtain, and there's always stuff going on behind the curtain that you're unaware of, don't know about, may never find out about. Even with you behind your own curtain. See, it's all a mystery. But in evaluating perspectives and surviving in the tsunami of passion, recognize some points of view are different than others, and one in particular, MMP, is definitely right from the beginning for a long time now, an ideal view of what Pilates is. And that's just one view out of thousands. It's a pretty good view. To some maybe, and to others not. But hopefully that view will help you, as a Pilates instructor, know what that means. Who are you as an instructor? When you instruct, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? If Pilates is exercise in one word, and in two words, Pilates is corrective exercise. It's that feedback loop. It's that having sensation that one can evaluate and respond to, that we slide in with a student in our instructions until they can dance on their own, move on their own, until they can aspire toward the ideal expression on their own and have a sensation that they're connected to in the pursuit of that sensation of alignment. Right? Evaluate points of view. Recognize that there are different points of view, and I'm one person standing up in the chorus of all of this and saying yes, and there's also an ideal point of view that can help you as a Pilates instructor. Practice being a presenter on your own, in front of the mirror, doing the 5 things, right? Joe's definition, promise, and sequence, core and tension, and the definition of MMP. Those 5 things. Write them down. Memorize them. And then say, yes, I can be a presenter. You know, and I'm willing to do it for this much. and then don't give it away. Have it be like Aretha and be cash in the purse on the Cadillac. I was going to say on the piano, because sometimes when she always took payment in cash right before she sang, so the story goes. And why could she do that? Why could she demand that? You could say that's who she was, yes, but who she was the person that was about to sing, and if you didn't pay her, she wasn't going to sing. And so when you are offering to take a person on a gondola ride and explain a point of view, two things really. And when you offer to do that, get paid up front, deliver it in, I would say, less than 55 minutes, for sure. No more than that. And probably less. And then if they like the point of view, they want more, either from you or someone you recommend. And if they don't want any more, they're at least better off from having heard the point of view, so that they don't feel completely off guard by someone else that wants to show them the same point of view. And has something to go on if someone else wants to offer another ideal point of view. You know, the no yo quiero que valga, Spanish. There are no buts about it. There's always buts, right? Evaluate points of view and then add 2 and 2. The differentiality that you distribute to others comes from a very pure, solid foundation. I'm talking about MMP now. If you know about MMP, you know, it's outside of or beyond the world of having known Joe or learned from somebody that knew Joe, because it's nothing to do with the tradition as much as the explanation and the ideal within that explanation. It's up to you. You have to direct your own thinking. And of course, Geist